Okay, I guess we'll start the, what are we at? February 10th, Transportation Advisory Board meeting. Start with roll call, please.
Chair Lader.
Here. Great. I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the first people have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. That was adopted by the Longmont City Council July 13th, 2021. And before we go to approving the minutes of the preceding meeting, I'm going to let Board Member Bennett speak.
Yes. Hello, TAB Board and all those here. I just want to make a update for sake of transparency. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I have moved and am spending a full-time amount of my time living in Denver, and still am living in Longmont part-time at least 4 days out of the month. And I, as the rules for Rule 27D in the procedures for the City of Longmont states that all board or commission members appointed by City Council shall remain a resident of the city during the term of their appointment. I still see myself as a resident in both Denver and Longmont, but I will wait and see clarification as it is unclear what is defined as resident by City of Longmont. Happy to serve, continue serving if I am still allowed to, as I have been a longstanding resident in Longmont for 15 years and deeply care about improving public transportation as well as all modes of transportation. So, thank you.
And a little add-on to that, I think the city attorney is probably going to answer to that probably this week sometime. Phil, can you fill in anything there?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. I just wanted to state that we are working with our city attorney's office just to clarify the meaning for this. We did check with our city clerk, and they deferred it to us. And so I'm not comfortable making that decision, obviously. I'd like to get some real information from our city attorney's office before making that determination, but we'll let you know as we know more. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to approving the minutes of the preceding meeting from January. Any comments or corrections that need to be made to the minutes from the January meeting? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve January 13th, 2025 minutes.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, those are approved. And we can move on to, excuse me, communications from staff. Phil?
Thank you, Chair Lehner, board members. Wanted to provide you a brief update on the RSVP project. The bridge, Boston Avenue Bridge, we've kept you up to date on that. We have now opened the trail, although there will be, as we move into spring, some partial closures while the contractor completes the landscaping and final work on the bridge and the surrounding area. But those would be temporary 1 hour, 2 hour closures. But on the whole, the trail should remain open. We are still working on a revised detour plan, which we hope to have basically completed shortly and then instituted as the Army Corps project gets underway. And then that will remove the long range, the longer detour to the north. So as we get closer to that, we'll get you more information on that. Army Corps is currently, they have issued the contract for the work. So the next leg up between the Boston Avenue and Sunset would be underway within a month or two. As they move forward with that. And then we have started the next design phase from Sunset to Hover. And so that's about a 16th, 18th month process to get us to about a 30% plan phase. But that is underway now. And so we're going to start getting some design down, working with some of the environmental groups as that plan comes to fruition.
Any questions for Jim?
Is there any ceremony to celebrate the opening of the trail? It's pretty exciting.
We have no planned ceremony for it. In part, I think we'll see more of a ceremony when we complete the whole project, and then have the whole trail completed, because we're still going to be closing it periodically. And then when we start undertaking the Hover Road section, there will be another detour as they take on that section. What that will be, we're not sure yet, but we're not really planning on a ceremony to open that little section.
Well, I guess my only question is, you mentioned design for Reach 3. Is that correct? Like, what's the percent?
It's titled the Hover
Okay.
Reach.
Okay.
But it is the section from Sunset to Hover.
Okay.
It is.
Because I know it's in our CIP in discussion tonight as well. So
Yeah, I can't recall the presentation, but they'll hopefully have
Okay.
more information for you. You can see
all
a
right.
picture of it.
Yeah.
But they're starting design on it. So anticipate, we do have some dollars, I think, in the 26 for some of the construction for hopefully a future match. There was a bond initiative, I think 2 years ago, for storm drainage. But the city never initiated the sale of those bonds. So that is the backup funding mechanism if grants are not forthcoming from the government.
Okay. And then also, just because I know it's been a big topic in the world I deal in of the detour, is there any knowledge of what the revised detour might be for bikes and peds?
So more than likely, the detail would be as they'll come up to Sunset, have to come on to Sunset, go south on Sunset to Boston.
All right.
Okay, so bikes can currently take that route, and it's pretty safe on the south side because there's a wide shoulder. But we're looking at expanding an existing sidewalk continuing the sidewalk down to the bridge on the north side for peds, and the shoulder could be used for bikes. But the area is it's still kind of a mess. So
Yeah.
that's part of the plan to clean that up, provide some temporary sidewalk. Could be asphalt, could be concrete. We're still working through that plan.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Quick question. Have we made any announcement online with the website through our email service, text service to residents, that sort of a thing, just as a, not ceremony, but letting them know that this has happened?
I'd have to check with our communications team as to whether we put out an announcement on it, but I don't recall seeing one. I think it was just kind of a soft opening of let's get it open and be done with it. And users a lot of people were using it anyway, going around the gates. So we'll check in with communications this week and get something out.
Great.
The next item we had was from Ben Ortiz regarding the winter bike to work days. So real quick on that one.
Members of the Transportation Advisory Board, Ben Ortiz, Transportation Planner. So those of you who are familiar with Denver Regional Council of Governments, or Dr. COG for short, they are the regional coordinators of the Bike to Work Day event in the Denver metro area. And so the city of Longmont will be hosting a bike to work day or a winter bike to work day breakfast station this coming Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. And the location is going to be weather dependent. So if we get decent weather and it's not precipitating, we'll be in the Civic Center Plaza. And we'll be serving breakfast burritos and hot cocoa and coffee. And we will also have a Ride Longmont vehicle on hand. We've specifically requested one with a bike rack so they could demonstrate to the riders on how to load their bike onto the bike rack. And they'll also have a staff person on hand to answer any questions about the service. And that's it. At the very best of times, we've had as many as 40 riders, and at the worst of times, when we've gotten into the low double digits, with people coming in with icicles on their beards, we've had as few as 3. So we will see, but hopefully we'll have some favorable weather and not too much ice on the ground.
Looks like a planned forecast of about 25 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning. So
we will
we'll
see.
hope to see you guys there. And really quickly, we just talked about Ride Longmont, so I did want to ask Kaylee to come up and just give you a quick briefing on how it's going with the different measurements that we have for data. So thanks, Kaylee.
Oh, sorry. Hi, good evening. Kaylee Fallon, Transportation Planner at the city. So we just hit our 2-month mark yesterday for the Ride Longmont Transportation Microtransit Service. So just wanted to give you all a quick update. So as of yesterday, at that 2-month mark, we completed 9,123 rides. We have over 1,000 active riders. And then we are looking at that average ride duration. We're still at that 12.5-minute mark. The average ride distance is 3.7 miles. And then the average pickup time, so the average time that one would have to wait after requesting that ride is 14.6 minutes. So our goal is to keep that at 15 minutes or under. So we are hitting that goal, and really excited to see that, we have over 9,000 rides in 2 months. So yeah, that was just a really high level update on the 2-month mark of service. Thank you.
Quick question. With the weather, February snow, and what we've had prior, we're seeing a decrease, increase with respect to ridership?
Yeah, so if the weather is severe enough to delay service on that day, then ridership on that day will be lower. We had one instance of that in January. I believe there was a polar vortex or a storm. It was very cold and very snowy, so we did delay service just for the safety, and so we did have less ridership on that day. But overall, for these past 2 months, haven't seen a huge drop in service. We've had pretty okay weather, not a ton of snowstorms so far. So, of course, we don't have data to compare that for summer months, but yeah, not seeing too big of an impact, at least for these 2 months right now.
We should say that we kind of broke one of our records of daily ridership after we started charging for the service. So it was free for that first month from December 9th to January 9th. Then we actually hit that record in that January 9th to February 10th time frame, so a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we are averaging about 150 to 200 riders per day.
2 questions. Do you have statistics on how many people start a ride and then abandon, like cancel their ride after they've requested it?
We do, yes. So that would be counted as an unaccepted proposal. And so we are averaging about anywhere from 20 to 40% on the day for unaccepted proposals. Those are higher on the weekends because folks see a high wait time on the weekends, and then they say, oh, I'll just get a ride with my friend or something like that. But
And if they cancel, is there any explanation, or do they have to give a reason for canceling, or it's just you cancel and that's it?
currently, they don't have to give a reason, so that you can just cancel.
Okay, that seems kind of high, 20 to 40%.
Well, that's
Yeah.
typically me just like checking to see how long the wait's going to be. So I'm always sitting there going, if I'm at home, it's like how long to work on a Sunday. And so then I usually don't take the ride, but I'm just checking. So it might be
Let's
folks.
filter out Phil.
It's my fault. It's my fault. So I'll stop doing that.
And then my other question for the bike to work, they're going to load a demo bike, or they're going to load the customer's bike? Whose bike are they going to be loading during the bike to work demonstration?
We would anticipate they would be loading a rider's bike,
Okay.
so just their bike.
Because the rider is responsible for loading their own bike, not the driver, correct?
Yes, I believe that's to be correct, which is the same on the RTD system.
Sure. Great. Awesome. Thank you.
A question for Kaylee. Could you tell us again how many total rides there have been in 2 months?
Yes, so there has been 9,123 completed rides.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any public invited to be heard? I didn't see a sign-up sheet completed, so it looks like we do not. Okay. We can move into, we have flipped items here, so we're going to do the TMP first, recommendations on that, and a vote to City Council, and then we will do the CIP after that.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, Phil Greenwald. Just wanted to let you know that we are at the very tail end here of the Transportation Mobility Plan. So thank you for everybody who's participated, and especially our steering committee members. So thank you so much for your time on that. Just wanted to really briefly say that we're excited to be at this 15-month process, end of it. I think we're very pleased with the product, and I know there's been some comments already on some improvements we can make to the product as well. So we appreciate that. That's really what this time is for, while we're doing the public input. So we've got the plan out there. We sent it out to all the different boards and commissions as well as to the public. So we're hoping that we get some good feedback on that. But with that, I'll turn it over to Carly Seif from Fair and Peers and let her kind of go through where we're at with the plan and what we're looking for from you tonight. Thank you. Well, there we go.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Once again, Carly Seif with Fair and Peers, the project manager on the consultant side. So the presentation this evening will be talking about the plan process, just a quick recap from the last time we were in front of TAB, and then going over the recommendations, and then talking about next steps. So a review of the timeline. Phase 1 focused on existing conditions. So we reviewed the state of Longmont today from a multimodal perspective, looking at walking, biking, transit, and driving, as well as safety and programs in the city, understanding travel patterns historically, looking at the infrastructure that's present today, as well as the programs that exist. We supplemented data with community outreach to understand how people feel about traveling, maybe some understanding of latent demand where people aren't traveling because they don't feel safe. So being able to pair that quantitative and the qualitative piece to create the foundation for which we built the recommendations from. We then entered phase 2 starting in the summer, where we developed recommendations for all modes for walking, biking, transit, and driving. We prioritized those recommendations and came up with an implementation plan by identifying funding sources as well as planning and monitoring that the city can do to be able to track success and implementation of the TMP over time. We also have programs and policies to supplement those infrastructure recommendations. We had a second phase of outreach to be able to tweak and hone the recommendations that we made to make sure that we were hearing accurately from folks and that the recommendations from the TMP were a representation of the community's ideas and values and priorities. And then now we're in our third phase of community input, where we have the draft plan available for public review, as well as an interactive website so people can interact with the recommendations and zoom in on maps, as we'll see in future slides. And here we are now at the final stage, getting ready for City Council adoption. So just a quick recap on community engagement. We had over 1,300 total touch points from the community through a multi-pronged approach. So we reached out to community members by holding traditional open houses, but also a lot of online engagement for folks who weren't able to attend in person. We also went to events to where community members are, everything from Bike to Work Day to farmers markets to the Equitable Climate Action Team, so focusing on focus groups as well for more intimate conversations. So a really robust outreach process where we heard from a diverse cross-section of community members to be able to understand their transportation challenges and their priorities looking into the future. So the deliverable for the TMP has two different formats. We have an interactive story map that serves as almost an executive summary, so a really public-facing document that's easy to digest. We have a lot of maps, so a lot of recommendations that are spatial, so we wanted to make a way for people to be able to zoom in, click on recommendations, lines on the map, and be able to see more details about that specific recommendation. So this interactive web map is a great way for the city to have a dynamic place for the plan to live, so as things do change and get updated over time, those maps can be updated as well. So it's a living document. And then we have a traditional TMP, so a PDF version that is much more detailed and comprehensive for those who do want to get into the weeds a little bit more. So I'll walk through each mode, the goals of that mode, what the TMP recommends, and then a little bit more of a visual demonstration of the recommendations. So for walking, the goal is to complete the pedestrian network by filling in gaps in the sidewalk network and upgrading sidewalk locations that are not meeting ADA compliance. So we created a prioritization process by developing an index of different inputs to understand where is it most important to have a complete and ADA sidewalk network, acknowledging that this is a really expensive undertaking, and we want to be able to provide a prioritized list of locations for the city to go through to be able to implement as funding becomes available. So the interactive web map shows key destinations, which was a way that we informed prioritization as well as transit routes, and then the different teams. Sorry. Sorry, the end of a sickness. You can also see the gaps in the network today where there's missing sidewalks and deficient sidewalks.
I can kind of take over too. So it shows the deficiencies in the sidewalk system. You'll see that there's different tiers that we're looking at. And I think I've seen these before. So just to kind of give you a heads up, the tier one is really those arterials that have bus networks as well. So obviously we're trying to get people safely to walk to those different elements. That's really the top tier, top priority of our network. Tier two is more of the lesser roads, the collectors and less that also have some kind of transit system on them. And so again, we're looking at those. And then tier 3 and 4 are kind of those other ones that we're looking at. And then we have some where we don't necessarily have any, some local streets that don't really have any priority except to fix them up as we go through those and do overlays and those kind of things. So, yeah.
Thank you, Phil. Okay. So you can understand where the missing gaps are and then what tier they fall under. So moving on to the bike network, the goal is to make it accessible and convenient to bike to and from anywhere in Longmont. So there's a lot of existing bike facilities that need to be upgraded, as well as gaps in the bike network that need completion. So the proposed bicycle network is extremely comprehensive, filling in those missing gaps and identifying what's the appropriate bicycle facility type based on street characteristics, so roadway volume, speed, as well as the land uses nearby. So if you move around and click on the map, you can see what's the bike facility that's there today, if there is a bike facility present, what's the current level of traffic stress, so that's that level of comfort, 1 through 4, and then what's the recommended bike facility type, the future level of comfort. We have planning level cost estimates as well, and then the prioritization score. So we'll talk about prioritization as we move through the presentation. We also have intersection recommendations to show how important it is to continue that low stress experience across the intersection as well. We're actually doing some safety analysis where we found out that 75% of fatal and severe injury bicycle involved crashes happen at intersections. So just really harping on the importance of making sure that we have high comfort intersection recommendations. So that's everything from grade separated crossings to at grade multimodal crossings as well. On the transit side, the goal is to improve transit in Longmont. We want to increase frequency and coverage, but also improve the experience at bus stops, acknowledging that a lot of bus stops in Longmont are not ADA compliant and have very few amenities, if any at all. So we have a set of short-term recommendations and a set of long-term recommendations for improving transit. So continuing to operate microtransit in the short term, and then upgrading bus stop amenities. We have a prioritization process for which bus stops to upgrade first based off of the number of boardings, and then which amenities should be addressed first. And then on the 300 series, there is a feeder plan developed by RTD a few years ago. And so the goal is to implement the recommendations from that feeder plan, which are really focused on accessing regional transit. And so those are the short-term recommendations focused on some realignment, some change in frequency, and coverage to access key destinations and to be able to have more seamless connections between the 300 series and regional transit.
I'll just add to a little bit to this slide is that we are trying to, when we're continuing operating microtransit, that's kind of one piece of this. And that is something that we as the city have taken on as our responsibility for providing that level of transit. But as you can tell, everything else on here is either Regional Transportation District, RTD, or Transport up in Fort Collins. So Flex Bus is Transport. So we don't do a lot with the fixed route bus system. We don't do a lot except have some input onto that system. So I think a lot of the comments that we received so far about why aren't we pushing for a better system have to do, or balancing that idea that we are really dependent on other providers of transit to provide that level. And so for us to say that we want to do more, better, faster, more frequent means that we really have to bring a lot more money to the table in order to get an RTD or Transport to provide more bus service, which is inherently expensive. They can't do it very well, even with their regional dollars. So those are some of the reasons why we don't kind of push the system further in this plan right now. We do have that idea that we want to get better connections to that system and really feed the ridership, but we don't have a lot of control over the actual buses at this point.
Can I just ask real quick, coming from RTD, what about the comprehensive operations analysis that they're doing, the COA that they say they do every, 18 months? How does that play into the TMP, or does that just kind of get done independently? Is that information or data or anything out of that going to be incorporated into the TMP at some point?
Those are different things. Those get implemented into the TMP, but not directly. So we don't call them out specifically in the TMP, but they are things that are happening underneath with, most specifically, Regional Transportation District. So RTD is the one who does a lot of that stuff. And they're basically in the process of updating a lot of their work, and they're being pushed at the legislative level as well to do things differently. So we're kind of leaning on a lot of those things outside of the city's control. So just to give you, again, a little bit more context of why you don't see us saying all buses must be this level of service, or we're trying to really provide much more coverage than what you see on the map. What we're doing is we're taking that RTD input and trying to express it as best we can on what we expect, and then how do we fill in those gaps. And that's really been microtransit so far. So if there's other thoughts, we're certainly open to hearing that, but we didn't hear that going out to the public. They were very excited about microtransit, and I think we're got a 3-year wait to see how that works. But just to kind of give you some more context.
So can the microtransit data help RTD make decisions on increasing new routes based on where people are going, saying, hey, we have a lot of population that's going from here to here? Is that what RTD is going to look at, or is RTD going to look at ridership on their current routes before they increase service?
Well, part of the whole partnership program that we are part of with RTD is we have to report back origin and destination data for the microtransit, and that does give them input then into the system to see are their routes covering what they need to, and where could they expand in the future or change in the future where they're seeing a lot of demand at a certain point, either origin or a destination. How could they better coverage? So we're going to push them on that. So thanks.
Some other things that the city does have control over are those first last mile connections through bicycle and pedestrian upgrades, and then the experience at the bus stop. So that's especially in the short term, focusing on those elements. And then, Alex, that's a great point. So in the long term, so continuing to upgrade bus stops, but to your point, identifying opportunities to increase coverage and frequency on local transit through using microtransit ridership. So having a really great sense of those origin destination patterns. So you anticipated the next slide. And then in the long term, continuing to see community input about how to identify future opportunities for local transit. And then lastly, another exciting update is the county is about to kick off a strategic transit plan, which will evaluate potential future providers, funding models, as well as route alignments for transit throughout Boulder County, focusing locally in Longmont, but also regional connections as well. So a great opportunity for the TMP to document some of this, but for this future county strategic plan to build off of it even further. And then there's a great inventory of bus stop amenities that the interactive web map builds off of Front Range Community College inventory. So you can click on bus stops and see what amenities are there, what amenities are being recommended to be prioritized in the future. Moving on to roadway, the focus on roadway improvements is to improve safety for drivers, which impacts safety for all modes, and then only focusing on capacity projects when there's an improvement in safety as well. So there's a number of different categories of roadway projects. Some of these bring MTIP projects from the previous Envision Longmont effort that haven't yet been implemented, continuing to recommend those in the plan, as well as identifying projects where the recommendation for a bicycle project requires reallocation of roadway space in order to implement that protected bike lane or that buffered bike lane. So often reallocation of a parking lane, turn lane, or travel lane is required in order to implement the bike lane. So those are shown in the orange lines. And then there's a very few capacity increase projects, a couple of new roadway projects, and then a big focus on multimodal safety improvements.
And when you delve into the plan a little bit more too, you'll see that we took the board's recommendation from a couple months ago and made sure that any capacity improvement puts vulnerable road users first. So that's part of the element that's in the plan now.
On the program side, understanding that programs are an important supplement to infrastructure if you're going to see that mode shift away from people driving in order to not just have the facilities present, but have the programs to support them as well. So programs fall into a number of different categories and encompass a lot of different things. So we've got kind of the broad reaching programs focused on innovation and emerging mobility, and then a set of transportation demand management programs as well. So I'll just run through these at a high level. Maintenance, anything from snow removal to debris removal, but maintenance of bus stops as well. Who's responsible for those maintenance of those different facility types? Bicycle and pedestrian amenities to support biking. So end of trip facilities like bike parking, having covered bike parking, secure bike parking, wayfinding and signage to make the network more intuitive for people and have an opportunity to brand and provide access to key destinations to denote those key destinations and how far of a walk or bike ride they are away. Emergency and evacuation planning to help address resiliency. Curbside management and parking, having opportunities for dynamic curbside management, flexible loading zones as well. E-bike policy, so setting speed limits and really educating e-bike users and other users as we have kind of this new and emerging and more popular mode that's on our roadways as well as our bikeways. Vision Zero, so upcoming Vision Zero action plan and the importance of the programmatic and infrastructure side of safety and Vision Zero. Safe routes to school, kind of a subset within that, focusing on increasing walking and biking to school and the programmatic and infrastructure side of SRTS. Data collection and monitoring, so we have identified a number of different data sources as well as performance measures that the city should continue to collect over time and track. And then in emerging mobility, ITS, with connected vehicles, there's a really great opportunity to improve efficiency of our system as well as safety. Automated enforcement, so Vision Zero is going to get into this even further, but really important as you think about speed limit setting and changing design speeds of the roadways, that's supplemented with enforcement, whether that be officers or automated enforcement. And as you expand your camera infrastructure, the ability to increase enforcement, to increase compliance of speed limits. automated and connected vehicle policies as AVs are on the horizon, making sure that there's policies in place to be in line with your goals for sustainability and to not increase vehicle miles traveled as opportunity cost for driving goes down. EVs, expanding your EV fleet and your charging station to promote more EVs, both city vehicles as well as personal vehicles. Shared micromobility, so building off of the Commuting Solutions Northwest Bike Share Feasibility Study, identifying opportunities for docked bike share within the city of Longmont and thinking about its regional implications. And then car share, expanding Colorado car share, other car share vendors' presence. And then lots of TDM, the policy side and programmatic side to encourage mode shift. Implementation. So all projects in the plan have been prioritized based off a number of different factors that were community-based, a very data-driven process. Things such as equity, so demographic information, safety, what's the crash history of the location where that project is recommended, access to key destinations, all play a role in what projects were identified and prioritized first. We have a plan monitoring table for the city to track those performance measures over time and track success of implementation of the plan and hold the city accountable and have a public transparency element. And then we've identified top 3 priorities, just distilling a lot of the themes in the plan, that safety is the most important driver of project prioritization and project identification too. Improving the bike network through a comprehensive and connected set of facilities, and then transit investments as well. So next steps are a request from TAB to go to council on February 25th for approval of the TMP. And then as Phil noted, the PDF and the interactive web map have been open to the public and comments closed tomorrow.
And we're hoping to go to council on February 25th. But we are looking forward to your recommendation and certainly all your questions. So thank you.
Trying to think of the best way to handle this. Do we want to make it an open forum? Would we like to have our questions per member?
I'm fine with it being open.
Okay, I would agree with you on that. I do, real quickly, just want to ask on the statistics that we've got listed on page 8 that were pulled. There might be some confusion. Those aren't national statistics. Those are statistics from or for the city of Longmont. Do we have a clarification on that?
The existing conditions summary came from national data sources focused on the city of Longmont.
Okay.
So using community survey data, American Community Survey.
Thank you.
And we can add text to make it clear that this is City of Longmont information.
I'm just going to ask some of Gina's questions before I get some of my own here, because I think some of it's good. With respect to the protected bike lanes listed in the plan, is it about a cost difference between buffered and protected? She has a concern that the overwhelming choice is for a buffered bike lane, which offers not much extra safety for a bike rider. So, and does that play into what we call stress levels with bike facilities related to that?
Yeah, so 2 reasons for recommending buffered bike lanes instead of protected bike lanes. Often roadways that have a number of driveways, protected bike lanes are confusing to users and it's unclear where the driveway is and where the bike facility is, and the bollards are just infrequent because you have so many driveways. So collectors tend to have a lot of driveways, and a buffered bike lane is considered a comfortable facility, a low stress facility based off of the volume and speed that you traditionally see on a collector. So we tend to recommend protected bike lanes on arterials and buffered bike lanes on collectors due to the speed, volume, and number of driveways on collectors. But if there's specific roadways that have a buffered bike lane recommended where you think a protected bike lane is more appropriate, we can definitely consider that change of facility type.
For protected bike lanes, I see that parking might be on the side and then the bike lane and then it's protected. Can we just put the bike next to the curb, move the parking away? And that's the protection between the traffic and the bicycle?
Yeah, so a parking protected bike lane would still need a buffer, a door zone. They end up taking up more width. You can definitely do a parking protected bike lane, but it does still need a buffer space. The door zone, you also tend to get, if you have high turnover parking, the people accessing their vehicles crossing the bike facility, which can cause conflicts between pedestrians and bicyclists. So in certain corridors, it makes sense to have parking protected. In other times, it is safer and more comfortable for parking to be against the curb and for the protected bike lane to be on the inside of the roadway.
We can hope. Yeah. I think I just have kind of a, I liked reading through this whole plan this morning. So, I think kind of a general question is how do we differentiate? Because I know what we're probably going to hear from members of the public is, well, aren't we doing Vision Zero? What's the TMP all about? What's kind of a conversation I can have with people about that?
Well, I think what we're saying to most folks, well, all folks, is that this is really the umbrella policy plan. This is that policy piece that we've spent a lot of time talking about lately. And so this is really for the whole city's transportation network and how it fits together. The Vision Zero piece is really going to look more at intersection by intersection improvements and those very specific, more detailed improvements about eliminating crash, especially fatal and severe injury crashes at certain locations. And those have typically been at intersections. So Vision Zero is going to take a much better or much closer look at that, as well as getting back to the idea of buffered versus protected bikeways, where we can always kind of default and look to see if we can provide that protected bikeway, even if it shows buffered on the plan, but how can we look at that and look at that first? And I think Vision Zero is going to go to that point of how do we look at protected bikeways first, and then understanding why we picked buffered bikeways in the plan was, again, a lot of what Carly just mentioned was just the overall safety of that corridor, the different driveway elements, and those things. So, but we'll take a much more detailed look at each one of these things as we start to look with Vision Zero lens.
Okay. Yeah, like that was kind of my assumption was Vision Zero will kind of get into maybe more of the specific design details, where this is, more of a policy idea. Is that pretty much correct?
Right. This is the policy that we've heard from our city council and from the TAB, quite frankly, and other boards and commissions. I mean, part of the steering committee was, what have you heard about this? Where do you want to go with this? And so the idea really was, again, I hate to always use this, but the 10,000 foot level look at the city and transportation and how it all fits together, all these different modes. Because another thing we don't like to really talk about is all these different modes in their own separate buckets, because they all work together as a system. And so they're all part of a system. And when we talk about bikeways and transit, and you heard us kind of say it in the presentation, the bikeways get us to the transit, the walkways help get us to the transit, all of it's working together. It's all different layers. And so at the end, we'd like to really see this as a layered policy document that takes the place of the current multimodal transportation improvement plan, which is much outdated. Like I've always said, it doesn't include microtransit. It doesn't really talk about dynamic curb elements that we're talking about here, as far as all the nuances that are coming online in the last, even 5 years, much less since 2016. So again, not answering your question directly, but saying it's the larger piece, and Vision Zero is really meant to drill down. We also have a number of sub plans, like the Main Street corridor plan, which is still going to remain intact, and those will be those details that we look to.
Just one specific example, the teal dots, we took the top 25% of locations with crashes and looked at where protected bike lanes cross arterials. The Vision Zero plan will start to look at crash patterns. So what are the crash types exactly that are happening in those locations? Are they right hook turns? Are they approach turns? Are they broadside? And then countermeasures that specifically address that crash type at that location and really focus on kind of the narrative and specific details of locations and what types of travel behaviors are we seeing and how can we make sure that crashes don't happen in the future versus this more higher level identification of locations without an understanding understanding yet of the specific infrastructure improvements that need to happen.
Okay, thank you. And then also on the PDF, there's many lists of various like proposed project lists. Obviously it doesn't end there, but just wondering, A, where does the money come from? And then B, from a policy perspective, I worry if we're talking about very specific things where maybe we need to be more generalized, to say, it's like, yeah, we want to improve, the whole city in a way. We're limiting to, 20 projects or more. So I don't know if that makes sense, what I'm trying to talk about.
Well, I'll try to give you some good answers. Hopefully, you're going to hear more about kind of where the money comes from and where it goes to when you hear about the CIP projects in their next level of this information item. But where does the money come from? I mean, we continue to try to leverage our city dollars wherever we can versus state, regional, and federal dollars. And I think you've heard that. As long as any of you have been on the board, you've heard us talk about how we've done our best to leverage those different pots of money. You hear about microtransit, 40% of that is RTD dollars. So we're pretty happy about that. We're hoping to get some federal dollars. We'll see how that goes. We're fighting for those as best we can. But where does the money come from? It's going to be that continued sales tax piece that the 3/4 cent sales tax that's been so great for this city, actually. So those dollars leverage a lot of extra dollars. So we're going to do as much as we can, as best we can, and as fast as we can here. So those will be the things that we go into as far as where the money comes from. And then the generalized view of these is, I'm not sure if I understand your question completely, but I think what you're saying is, are you looking at the entire city for these projects, or are you just focusing on certain? I think this plan really takes a lot of effort to look into the equity-based projects. So places that may not have seen projects in the past may have been overlooked, and not by anybody, not in a purposeful way, but just in kind of a general sense of where the needs were. We need to start putting those needs where there's population that has, more need for, where there are no where car ownership is lower, where incomes are lower, where we know people are struggling to just use a transit system. We're going to try to put those resources, and that's what this plan has done with a lot of the equity outreach piece, is how do we put those resources where they really are needed today. So
Okay. No, I like it. That's all for now.
I want to piggyback off of Councilmember Wickland's board member. With respect to, again, kind of, we talk about budget, and we know it's not an open spigot, and there's different sources for this funding. I guess what I'm curious is we do have this bucket of projects that we'd like to do, part of it's CIP and otherwise. How are we going to prioritize based on those projects and the dollars that we know are either not just available, but potentially available? Do you do any sort of scoring against that to look at these projects and if you will, kind of look at them and say, this is feasible because we know there's, say, Streets for All, and that funding is this bucket of money. And I realize we still have to apply for grants and what have you. But are we scoring these projects in such a way as to look at the economics of it or the dollars of it?
So Vision Zero will do a cost benefit analysis, and that's a big input into prioritization there. This is a choice that the city can make to prioritize against the cost of the project and its competitiveness in funding, and we chose not to. So you can continue to go down the project prioritization list and find the first project that would qualify for a Safe Routes to School grant, or find a project that is below a certain cost estimate. So it's a very flexible prioritization, and it's not driven by costs, so that the highest cost project doesn't end up at the bottom of the list, or a project doesn't bump to the top of the list because it hits a certain few rubric marks. But the prioritization is built in such a way that it's extremely flexible, and it serves as a guide for the city.
Yes. So my first question is, so since it's a living document, what does the process look like to update this document?
Yeah, so the interactive web map or story map and the map post pieces are what's dynamic. So as your shapefile changes of what bike facilities exist today, that will change. As the bus stop amenities change, that piece will change. So really focused on the map part more than anything.
Nice. And some things that I see that appear missing. Well, I first want to like commend you on the local piece. There's a lot more transparency and understanding what the future of the RTD local is. But I'm not seeing as much when it comes to the regional maps, as the bus staying at the Longmont Firestone Mobility Hub is mentioned, but the bus staying service that goes from Fort Collins to Denver is not explicitly mentioned. And there's also no clarity on RTD's plans to what they will do with the J route or the LX, if they're going to bring those back, and if there's any intention on that, as well as there's one more. Yeah, but I digress. I just am not saying as much on the regional part of this.
I believe we focused on regional routes that go through city boundaries, and although that busting goes to a hub that is accessible from a route that goes from city boundaries, it isn't within the city. So definitely finding a balance of that's going to be a great asset to Longmont users, but focusing on the 119 East connection more so than the north-south connection outside the city, and then hard to convey the transition from like the Bolt and the J to the 119 orange and blue. Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah. I'm just I see all the proposed and there's a map that that has little dots that suggest like these regional things, but it's just not explicitly laid out, and so I just wasn't sure.
If you click on those lines, there should be additional information, but I believe it's conveyed that the J, it's transitioning to BRT in the future. JSO is existing, and orange and blue lines are shown as BRT in the future.
Okay.
With those connections, but we can make sure that that's all clear.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
And if it's helpful to add bus staying on I-25, we can do.
I think it would be good to mention the bus staying as being, again, part of that layer.
Yeah, because that really also does help readers understand why we are going so far east on Ken Pratt. And additionally, I'm not seeing there's the on the local service recommendations map on page 50. It does say the First and Main Transit Station, but it doesn't explicitly mention that it's not only proposed, but it is an inevitability. And so I think that'd be also an important future, something to put in the future goals, as well as it would be such a big change to have that mobility hub at 66 and Main. And that's not meant, it's once again shown in the map, but just there's no mention of what's going to be of there. If I remember correctly, RTD said that they're planning a park and ride, but I'm just not seeing any mention of it.
Yeah, and the plan leans heavily on the map. So if you go in this map and click on that dot, it expands and you can see State Highway 66 park and ride, and we've drawn a buffer of where increased land use density should be within a quarter mile of those park and rides as well. But we can add text referencing that.
Nice. Great. Yes. Overall, I really appreciate the pragmatism of there is a lot of clarity over what the goals are in these sections, and I do appreciate the interactive features. So thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Carly. Overall, I want to compliment you on a well thought out, well executed draft document. Phil or Carly, could you put the PDF up on our screen of the full draft? I have some comments on particular pages and sections of the document, and it might be easier to explain them if they're up on the screen. There we go. Starting on page 17. There's a reference to the capital improvement program projects on page 17, including a link to it. There it is. You got it. And then it says the transportation projects can be found between page 176 and 199. When I clicked on that, I found that the transportation projects were actually on pages 198 to 226. So you might want to update that or double check it. And then going to page 20, on the introduction to the bicycle network, there's a sentence that reads, quote, while there is a comprehensive bicycle network in place today, new facilities and upgrades of existing facilities are needed, end quote. I believe that there are enough significant gaps in Longmont's current bicycle network that we shouldn't say that there is a comprehensive network in place today. I would recommend that that be changed to read, while many elements of a bicycle network are in place today, more work needs to be done. Page 36. That is part of a very large table 2, which is titled Recommended Bikeways Project List. And I was really impressed at the level of detail that went into this table. There must be hundreds of prioritized projects. But my question is, it has to do with ID numbers 116 and 117. Are all of these projects and roadway segments supposed to be in the city of Longmont?
Yes, at least one termini.
Okay, because I think this area that includes Craig Road, Schlegel Street, and North 89th Street is one of those unincorporated Boulder County inholdings in that part of town. So you might want to check on that.
I can check on this later too.
I don't know if you'll have enough detail on that map, but the two streets mentioned there that run north-south, they both meet up with that Craig Road annexation site that was a recent topic of much discussion at city council meetings. So I think that that area is also unincorporated Boulder County at this time.
I think we just wanted to say that we want to work with Boulder County to make these connections because they're critical to people getting through Longmont. We've heard this a lot in public meetings recently with annexation projects in these areas. So what we were trying to do is meet that intent of, we have a system that's really good on either side.
Yeah.
How do we work with Boulder County to meet, to fill the gap?
Yeah, maybe that deserves a footnote or an asterisk or something. Going to page 43. It's table 3, prioritization of completing sidewalk gaps versus upgrading deficient sidewalks. That table is referred to as Table 2 on the previous page. So you need to check those table number references. And my question about that is, was the prioritization index for sidewalks applied to produce a project list like that really long bicycle project prioritization list we just looked at in Table 2? I didn't see that here. And if not, how was the decision made to put so much more effort into bicycles than pedestrian projects?
There isn't a table for pedestrian upgrades because the data on gaps in the sidewalk network and deficient sidewalks isn't complete. So there's not the baseline data to be able to identify where recommendations need to happen, which is why it was formatted the way it is, that as that data is upgraded or as a resident complains about a gap in the sidewalk network, the city can reference the map to understand what tier the roadway falls under that resident complaint came in on. So a lot of it's just due to data availability to be able to understand where the gaps need to be completed without knowing where the gaps are today.
You have identified how that data will be addressed once it's available. That's the prioritization index.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. Going to page 54. Community support for future transit. Now, in this table, the Airport Road corridor shows up as a close second in gauging community support for future transit routes. But the future plan for the 3 series routes does away with the very limited existing Route 324 service that there is on Airport Road. There's about a half a mile between Clover Basin and Nelson where the 324 runs, and that's proposed to be deleted. So I'm wondering, why was this table even included if what it indicates wasn't taken into account or didn't really affect the plan? And I have another similar comment. There's a
Well, if I can just address your first one.
okay. Go ahead.
Just to talk a little bit more about Airport Road, I think we saw that as a positive because we did see bus rapid transit on Airport Road as far as that J extension that you mentioned earlier. So there is an orange route right now listed as bus rapid transit on 119 that will include the southern portion of Airport Road south of Nelson. So,
And would that be available to local transit riders?
yeah, you could take that into Longmont as well at the local fare level, which is right now it's free for us, but we'll have to figure out what that is going to translate into, because you can't take the Bolt today. Even in town, you can't take it as a local bus for free, but you pay the local fare, which is a very, very reasonable fare. But we'll have to figure out what that is. But it really would get you from the southwest part of town up to all the way to Highway 66 and Main Street if you wanted to do so. So that does provide those connections.
Okay. And then there's a figure 20 also, that's the transit propensity index, which shows that part of Longmont, the northwestern sector, which is served by Airport Road as an arterial. It shows that as having a high DRCOG mobility score. So maybe there could be a reference in here to the Orange Line BRT route that would address both the mobility score and the community preference for Airport Road service, so that it makes it look like somebody paid attention to these two figures.
And just to add to that a little bit. So these are in the long-term section where we've kind of laid the groundwork of things that need to be considered when changes to local transit are made as a part of the Boulder County Strategic Transit Plan, which are community input. And so we've shared the community input that we've gathered as a part of the TMP transit propensity here as well. So kind of setting the stage for future analysis and future recommendations, acknowledging that in the short term, given resources available, the focus is really on the recommendations that have already been made by RTD. But in the long term, these will set the stage for what transit might shape up to look like in the future.
So is it fair to say that RTD's plans for feeding the BRT routes are really the primary driver of this whole future of transit in Longmont?
Part of the layer, yes, they're going to expand services where we've never seen services before, but some of the expansion will not help some of these other pieces. So we're looking at the layering of, I hate to lean so heavily on it, but microtransit as part of this. Because here's some areas, high propensity of transit ridership, but we've tried transit in these areas and it's not done well in the past. So I think RTD has a tough time going back into these areas to try to test that theory, what we see on the map. So how do we prove it with microtransit and use that data then that comes back and says, yeah, people are wanting to ride it from there. That is a critical origin for microtransit. Or how do we cover it in other ways besides fixed route? But we do want to make sure we have a fixed route near there.
Mm-hmm.
And RTD in the short term does not show a new fixed route in that area.
I see. That sounds like a good application for the Ride Longmont data.
And Ride Longmont helps us understand where it's more cost effective to have fixed route in the future. On demand is a great way to fill in gaps, but isn't the most cost effective way when you have a high density of origin destination patterns. So it's kind of creating that set of data to then be able to know where to transition certain corridors from on demand transit to fixed route transit where it's more cost effective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on page 60, table 5, roadway project corridors. And again, on the previous page, 59, it calls it table 4. So there's a, that needs to be checked. But my question is, which of these projects, would result in 8-lane intersections? But maybe that's the other table. Is that the one on page 70? Are there 8-lane intersections on that table?
There's a separate table for intersection projects, but the level of detail doesn't identify number of, are you including turn lanes? But regardless, the level of detail of the recommendations doesn't get to that level. It's understanding that there needs to be safety improvements made, but not yet understanding number of turn lanes and number of general travel lanes. But Vision Zero will identify that.
But there are capacity improvements also included on this table, right?
I believe there's 2, so we could look at those and see the current number of lanes. And those are previous MTIP projects, so we could look at the old MTIP and understand that.
Yeah, I can probably also find out by looking at the CIP.
But it also goes back to that idea that this Transportation Advisory Board came up with a statement that all future capacity improvements take into account vulnerable road users first. So I think that's the message back to all the folks sitting here tonight, that one of the things we look at with any kind of capacity improvement is making sure that the safety, and I think that's written in every one of these notes, says something about pedestrian friendly, bike friendly, multimodal, all those kind of things pop up first because we're really trying to flip that script of auto first typically was the way we looked at it, and now we're moving it toward looking at safety for all users and people.
Okay, thanks. On page 70, that's a continuation of Table 6. There's a project, Airport Road and St. Vrain Greenway underpass for $7.1 million. Isn't there already an underpass there?
No, this is the one that is basically considered kind of the western portion of the St. Vrain Greenway, west of Golden Ponds. So there is capacity for an underpass there under the bridge under Airport Road, where the St. Vrain crosses Airport Road, but we have not built any facilities for bikeway yet. And so this would be part of that. And I wonder if the 7.1 is a little over the top for the price of that, because I think we have most of it, I won't say ready to go at all, but we do have the bridge in place and we have the capacity underneath to facilitate that greenway.
All right, I guess I was thinking of another underpass that's just east of the airport runway. That's
We
not
do have
considered-
one there, Lycans Gulch, yeah. That one does exist, you're correct.
Okay, that's Lycans Gulch,
But
and it's not
this one has
considered
been
to
planned-
be part of St. Vrain.
Yeah, this has been planned for the St. Vrain Greenway, with a future extension to Lyons, basically, is what that was considered, I believe.
Got it, thank you. On page 75, automated enforcement. It reads that a strictly data-driven approach might place red light or speed cameras in locations with the highest number of collisions. I can see how that might be good data for red light cameras at intersections where you want to find out where the collisions are happening. But why not use specific data about speed to inform the placement of speed cameras? Is there data available from traffic tickets written, or those mobile units that I believe now can record speeds as well as just notify drivers of how fast they're traveling?
We could add that to the sentence.
Is there speed data,
There is.
specifically speed-related data?
I mean, as you mentioned, the police department does include where they set up for speed enforcement. And so we can certainly add that as part of that sentence if you'd like. I mean, that makes sense.
Okay. On a related topic, on page 81, there's a reference to leveraging the Safe Streets for All funded cameras. What are those?
Speed cameras.
Are those cameras that Longmont already has and is ready to deploy?
No. Through the Safe Streets for All program, we applied for a federal grant. We were the grant was basically in three parts. One was for support for the Vision Zero action plan. One was for a new study for sight distance at residential intersections, and then the third was financing for what we call off-network intersections, which is outside of the DOT CDOT realm. Okay, so it's cameras on our local city streets that are for activation or actuation of the system, and those cameras, the newer cameras we're using, also collect data on pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars. So we've got notice of a grant award. We do not yet have a grant agreement in place. That has not yet been provided by the overseers of the grant, so we are waiting to hear if those federal dollars will still come through. I can get you separately get you a list of those intersections, but they are like on 17th. I think we're updating, as we update our camera systems to manage and run the signal system, we're adding those newer cameras.
Right.
And they will collect data. I think Kyle, one of the previous meetings, we provided some information on some of those. So that's what is the Safe Streets for All grant we're looking on.
Got it. Yeah, I remember that presentation from a previous meeting. On page 82, shared micromobility. I'm recalling a reference from, I think it was our last meeting, to CAMP bikes that seem to be happening, and maybe this section should be updated a little bit to talk about those.
Well, yeah, we can do that. The camp grant is something that we have been awarded $1.5 million for the region, for the Northwest region. So we'll be sharing those funds with other communities. But you're right, we do have some information there and that's a state grant, so that one is coming through. And so we can add that, certainly.
Great. And page 88, it talks about plans that are fiscally constrained. And I understand that that means there has always been $2 million allocated for bicycle projects. And I'm wondering why, if the city is inverting the transportation modal hierarchy, why wouldn't the fiscal constraint for bicycle projects, or if there's a similar constraint for pedestrian projects, why wouldn't those numbers increase to reflect the policy changes that the city's putting in place? The numbers there in Table 9, they just assume it's always going to be $2 million a year out into the far distant future. Why not consider increasing the funds available for pedestrian and bicycle projects?
I don't think we have a clear answer for that, but we can certainly try to figure out why or what this part is trying to say. We did specifically kind of go against doing a fiscally constrained plan, correct? I mean, maybe there's more information about that piece of it, but
Yeah, the unknowns of funding sources for other modes were the reason we chose to just do a fiscally constrained plan for biking, and decided to be conservative and assume a consistent amount in 2024 dollars across the board. But that would be a conversation to have amongst city staff if there's a reprioritization, shifting funds that have historically gone to roadway projects towards bike projects would be a decision that city staff would.
And how long has the $2 million per year for bicycle projects been in effect?
I think we worked on that as part of this plan. I mean, it was to pull out the elements of all projects that included bicycle pieces, and you'll see that later in the CIP piece too, where we have projects that are part of the CIP, but they also include a bicycle element. So we tried to pull out those elements for bike and ped actually, and see how much we were actually allocating to these projects, because we always call them roadway projects. Roadway is transit, bike and ped, right? So, and there's also a vehicular component to that. So I think we were trying to pull some of that element out to make it more fair toward what we do for bicycles, because we really weren't taking credit for a lot of that work.
So this isn't a $2 million limit that has ever been in place. This is something that was estimated for the purposes of this plan. I understand. Okay.
And it certainly doesn't tie the city to those numbers. It's a way to understand how many miles of bike facilities do you estimate you can implement a year based off of a historical CIP investments, and then gives a sense of how many years will it take to build out the whole entire proposed network based off of this estimate if you were to continue at the current rate that you have historically, just to give an understanding of, are we building a network in 2050 or 2040, to know what the horizon year is for this.
Great. Thank you for answering all my questions. I have one more. You've received comments and questions from our board tonight. Would you still like us to fill out the survey? And if so, what time tomorrow does that close?
It will close midnight tomorrow. So
Midnight tomorrow.
reality 9 a.m. on the 13th. And that would be helpful if all of the comments that you've conveyed here I've noted, but if you have any additional comments, it would be helpful to relay them in the survey.
Great. Thanks again.
Also on page 88, it says table 8, but it is listed as table 9. So
I saw that as well. We'll correct all the table numbers. They're all linked, but I think that I just need to be refreshed.
Thank you all. A lot of work went into this. Long road ahead is coming to an end, so thank you all. This looks great. I have a couple questions about sidewalks, so if you go back to page 14. And I'm curious if the sidewalks that have sloped corners, so instead of them being a 90-degree corner, the ones that are sloped kind of near Lou Miller Park, are those ADA compliant? And are those, if not, are those expected to be updated as well? So instead of being a corner, they kind of slope down.
Board member Kolkoffer, I would recommend if you have specific instances that you're raising questions on in regards to infrastructure, send us an email.
Okay.
Give us kind of explicit information or a map of showing those locations, and we can check on them. And if and see where they would be in a repair schedule, or if they're not ADA and they're really bad, we can put them into a schedule for repair for later this summer. But as part of the overall TMP, that's getting a little bit into the weeds
Sure.
on it, and there's other mechanisms for us to identify those and repair them.
Okay, going back to sidewalks, for the sections that are unincorporated, are those also on the plan to get updated with Boulder County, or is that separate?
They're just shown, again, back to the idea of a network of sidewalk. So we show them, but we would be reliant on Boulder County to actually fix them and work with them in partnership.
Or fill them in?
And Weld County as well, yep.
Sure. And then for the signage for that got passed at the last council meeting, would there be bus ETA information and schedules? I don't know if anybody can answer that.
We would have those initially at the bus rapid transit stops. So we have a number of stops planned for the bus rapid transit system. And they're also coming out for a public meeting, I believe, late spring. So we'd love to be able to tell you those dates and locations, and so that you can go and make the case for even more stops if we'd like to see it. It is bus rapid transit, but those will have those public information displays that Ben worked hard to get into the sign code. And so that will show the information of next bus, when it's coming, location, and those kind of things. So it'll be a lot of information in those for folks at the stop. And they'll have, obviously, their different apps that they can use to track the buses as well. But I think that's going to be the visual that's up there that immediately tells you when the next bus is coming.
Okay. For page 79, I've been going to a lot of the Vision Zero meetings, and a lot of people raise concerns about Class 3 e-bikes on public trails. How are we going to enforce Class e-bikes on trails?
I think the bigger idea, and Carly kind of touched on this a little bit when she went over programs, is that with e-bikes, we might have to go to more of a speed limit piece, because I don't think we can really tell what type of bike you have. I mean, typically we're looking for some kind of pedal motion or pedal assist, and that's what's kind of regulating it at this point. So you can't just be throttle only. So that's one way to tell, but I think it really comes down to what's the speed limit allowed, because we have a lot of different devices that aren't electric bikes, these mono wheel pieces and all these different things that are electric driven, that, we don't have necessarily laws to prohibit or incent, but I think it comes down to speed limit as far as where we have more congested levels on, especially greenways, that we're going to have to start to think about as far as the next stages in this plan.
So how do we enforce speed limits then?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other piece of it, is how do you do that, especially if you don't have any kind of display of like a license plate, like we can with others, like we're going to do with this automated system that we've been talking about. The idea is that you would have to have some kind of park ranger element to that, or some kind of human element that works on that. And that's going to be a lot of effort. That takes a lot of labor, right? So how do we do that, and how have other cities? We're going to have to start leaning on other cities on how they've been able to enforce these. So other people have been successful, so we'll just need to keep reaching out to our neighbors and around the country as we go and learn more about what's happening. So I don't have a good answer, but we'll work hard on it, and I think congestion will be part of that enforcement, actually. More people, it's going to have to get slower.
Sure. And then my last question on autonomous vehicle policy. Can we put in place now about a policy for empty vehicles just driving around our town, kind of congesting our streets, just kind of waiting for a rider to come call it? I'm just nervous that we're going to have all these AVs that are just circling Longmont, just waiting for a ride and just taking up space.
Well, certainly with direction from city council, we could do that, but I think we'd want to see it at least start to come into the state. We haven't even seen these come into the state yet, and I certainly want to be prepared, or I think the council wants to be prepared for when these do come. But it is, right now, it's kind of a weather dependent kind of piece of infrastructure, so we need to kind of see how other folks have been dealing with this, and what the rules you want to put in place that will regulate that, what they're trying to do or not do. I think where you're going is VMT, vehicle miles traveled on our roads, that are unnecessary, and also possibly emissions, depending on the type of vehicle that's being driven around. So I think all these things need to be factored in, and we need to start looking again to our the other cities that have taken these on and are experimenting with them now, and see what kind of issues they've run into and what kind of regulations they're using, and use that as a model as we move forward. But not sure if you're asking for us to do it today or if you're asking council to consider this, but I think that's where it goes next. Is it would have to be a city council recommendation to our, and then they would take it to our city manager, and that's how it would become a work item that we need to work on through our city attorney's office, really, with
Okay.
our help. So
Great, thanks.
One last thing. Not really a question. I appreciate all the effort that was put into this, as everybody here has echoed. It has to relate to really, I guess, this information in TMP. There's a lot of dense information in here. And my fear is that this information isn't really going to get out to the residents. And so, considering we were talking about the achievement of the St. Vrain Bikeway opening and bridge at Boston, and using communication staff to be able to get that information out via website, however which way that is, I think the most important thing that we can do as a board, as a city, is to educate our residents, because part of that education is going to help advise as to what's coming down the road, figuratively, not literally. As well as why we're doing these things. We talked about speed enforcement. And rather than maybe giving a fine out, for the first 60, 90 days, we give a Vision Zero pamphlet out to the driver and say, this is the reason why we're doing this. It's for safety for all, and we want to lower speeds and what have you. So the education component, I don't want that to get lost. And there is such good information in here in tidbits that how do you spoon feed, if you will, residents and folks in the community beyond that to know this is why we're doing it, partly reason behind it, because I do think there is so much good data here that if somebody does kind of know some of these things, it's going to help kind of advance the ideas and kind of the vision that we have here. So I know that's very open-ended, and I don't know if there's an answer to my question.
well, I think it does go back to we have the story map summary data, which I believe is very helpful as far as being.
I don't know offhand, but we can check.
But that provides that summary level, and then you can dive deeper as much as you want to get into those maps, right? So you can get into those different projects and try to figure out.
How do we reach the point is that this is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining, but I guess the issue is that we have the story map and we have that here, but residents aren't always going to find it there. So how do we reach them with these little maybe possible tidbits of information that are important, that are critical maybe for their understanding as to why all these changes are happening? Because you know as well as I do, when we flip the modality with vulnerable road users versus cars, we're going to get a heck of a lot of complaints when that stuff starts kind of reaching to the level of where we're seeing projects in that. And I'm sure you've probably already gotten some on some road diets and that sort of thing. So again, how are we going to educate maybe the resident who won't go to the website? No, I shouldn't say won't, just doesn't and won't access it that way. And I know, again, I don't know if there's an answer to my question.
Yeah, I think what we just try to do is with our public information officers, we try to reach out as best we can and just show off pieces of the plan. And I think a lot of it's going to be that dashboard related piece where we start to talk about projects and how those impact different areas of the city based on the prioritization of them and what we're looking at trying to fulfill kind of those policy statements by city council and what we're trying to meet with those different projects. So I think it's really going to become more project based, and then people can go to the other elements of program measures and those pieces to figure out how it all fits together. It's going to be difficult, though. You're right as far as explaining and teaching and educating what was meant with this plan. I'm already getting a lot of that feedback from just staff who don't work in transportation every day. You know, how is this TMP going to work into the future? So we need to answer that at a bunch of different levels. So we'll work on that. But I think it does a lot. It's going to be much better than what our current MTIP piece is, where it's just kind of buried in Envision Longmont and people don't really understand any of it. So this is the next step. It's kind of a growth we, birth through adolescence through adulthood here. So we're starting to kind of get our legs underneath us here a little better with these transportation mobility plans.
And the last thing I just want to say is, given the fact that there could be some uncertainty to federal funding, and as we go down the road here, prioritizing what's important, what's not, is going to require maybe even more resident and public-facing input to know that, yes, this is important to more than just this group that always does show up. And that's the other concern that I have, is the more education and more advising that we can do, the more feedback we're going to get that's going to be more positive or help us prioritize what we're doing.
To respond to Chair Lehner's question, I'm thinking about the newsletter that the city inserts with utility bills. And I believe those are mailed out even to residents who specifically asked to have online-only accounts. So that might be a way to put in a reference to the story map, a link to it, and you might get a number of hits that way.
Or even the online portal. Maybe somebody would click on it to see. Sorry, I don't have my mic on.
There's also a vision statement that hopefully encompasses the future priorities and this modal shift. So even if folks don't click on the link, maybe just stating that vision for the future of transportation.
Anything else before we move to a vote on moving this to City Council? So I guess we can maybe just get a motion to vote, because it sounds like everybody has exhausted their questions or comments. Councilmember Yarbrough, do you have anything you want to add? Okay. I just wanted to check in. All right, let's go ahead and, if we can, move a motion and vote. I move that we move the TMP, approve it to move to City Council for them to vote on or adopt. Sorry.
I second the motion to recommend to City Council that the TMP be approved.
Great. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes.
Thank you so much for your time on this. Next up is our CIP programs, and I'll introduce Alden Jenkins as the presenter. We'll get his presentation up as well.
Hi, good evening. Chairperson Lanier, TB members, and Council Member Yarborough. My name is Alden Jenkins. I'm a senior civil engineer within our Transportation Engineering Department. Tonight, we're going to provide an update on our 2025 Active Capital Improvement Program, project program. Joined tonight by two other staff members to help with the presentation. Have another senior civil engineer, Alex Donaldson, to join in part of the presentation, and then also senior project manager, Sarah Krecha, who is from our Parks and Natural Resources Department. A little bit different from previous presentations where we've usually just focused with our Transportation Engineering group. We have expanded to include a few projects from our Parks and Natural Resources Department that are transportation related. So we are going to showcase some of our projects that are included in the communication that you received this evening. I'll let the cat out of the bag right now, actually, for TAB member Wickland. We do not actually have the RSVP represented in the presentation, unfortunately, but we do have staff here to be able to provide an update and more information on that as needed. Quick clarification, some of the projects that are going to be under design, not that many, but a limited number of them are still seeking construction funding dollars. So that just as an added caveat of as we still work through design on some of these projects, we still have to pursue and finalize where our funding sources are coming for some of those projects. Overall, our presentation is going to be about 20 minutes long, and we'll look to have questions at the end and can address whatever you have at that time. So jumping into our first projects, we'll start with our active construction projects and then move into pre-construction and design from there. So our first project is actually largely completed at this point. It was already mentioned earlier in the evening. It's the Boston Avenue Bridge project. This was a bridge replacement project of an existing structure that provided a longer and wider structure over the St. Vrain Greenway. By having the wider and longer bridge structure provides an opportunity for a larger channel to help convey larger storm events underneath the structure itself. Did also provide some improvements to the adjacent River Road intersection just to the west of the bridge structure in the form of some pedestrian connections and bike connections. As I mentioned, that project is essentially complete with only remaining work of some final minor grading, landscaping, irrigation that's supposed to take place spring of this year. Next project is one that is in the throes of heavy construction on the corridor, Kaufman Street Mobility Improvements Project from 1st Avenue to 9th Avenue. This is a project that is going to be adding significant multimodal access to this corridor of Kaufman Street, primarily in the form of transit lanes in some areas, improvements to pedestrian access, wider sidewalks, and then also the addition of new facilities with separated and protected bike lanes, both directions of Kaufman Street from one end of the project to the other. Just point of clarification, on the image you have on the screen, sidewalk is provided on the right and the separated bike lane is on the left. We still have a significant amount of work yet to be done in terms of actually tying this all together since we don't have any of our current plans for signage or pavement markings in place yet that will help clarify where is the sidewalk, where is the bike lane, because it's certainly going to be in some areas less clear than when you have a separated area between the two. One of the other key features of this project is the installation of protected intersection components at the Longspeak Avenue and 4th Avenue intersection. These protected intersection features will provide a safer and much more comfortable experience for those biking and walking, not only crossing Kaufman Street, but also Longspeak Avenue. Provides a safer mixing zone for bikes, changing which direction they like to be going. So if they're wanting to make a left turn, they don't have to enter traffic in order to do so. They can do it safely from the corners. Finally, one of the last main components of this project is the asset management of the aging pavement infrastructure along the corridor. So it is a full replacement of the existing asphalt that is there today. The project is approximately 30% complete as of today, and we are actually just now, as of a week or two ago, moving into the southern phases of the project. The northern phase is getting wrapped up in terms of we have all of our concrete completed, and it's just a matter of waiting for better weather now for us to be able to actually finalize the pavement section and do the paving on the northern phase of the project. We're looking at construction concluding in middle of 2026 currently at an estimated direct cost with a contract of $16.5 million. Moving on from our projects under active construction, we've got our pre-construction projects now. So design essentially complete, and we're just in the phase between that and actually advertising the project for bid. So our first project is the Boston Avenue connection, second phase of that project actually. That's going to be putting in a new segment between Price Road and South Pratt Parkway, connection of Boston Avenue. By doing so, there will be a new at-grade crossing at the BNSF Railroad just east of Price Road. Alongside that at-grade crossing will include some quiet zone components, so it will not be a new crossing. It will be quiet zone compliant. And then as this project is completed too, it will act as the primary access point to the west side of Longmont for the future bus rapid transit services that are going to be coming to Longmont. In addition to that, the west leg and south leg of the intersection are going to be seeing some significant improvements to pedestrian access where none or very little currently exists. This project is expected to start construction in the second or third quarter of this year at an estimated cost of $5.3 million. Pass it on to partner in crime, Alex.
Good evening, board members. As Alden introduced me earlier, I'm Alex Donaldson. I'm a senior civil engineer. I'm on the same team as Alden, and I have 3 projects to discuss with you tonight. They're all in Southwest Longmont, and we're going to work from east to west as we talk about these. So the first project I have is our intersection improvement project at the intersection of Ken Pratt Boulevard and South Sunset Street. This project is a intersection improvement project that is safety driven. It's going to improve safety for every mode at this intersection. It will introduce controlled left-hand turns for the auto mode. It will improve the intersection by creating bike lanes that travel through north-south through the intersection here for the bicycle mode. And then for the pedestrian mode, we'll be detaching the sidewalk as it crosses the railroad, which will improve pedestrian safety in this very congested crossing. There's a lot going on as you're walking around in this area, as there's both the state highway and the railroad. This project, it also includes a pavement rehabilitation element. And this pavement rehab, it goes from this intersection here at 119 and goes all the way up to Boston Avenue. And that pavement rehab will also complete the Sunset Street road diet that is currently only between Boston and Nelson. This project will complete it from Nelson all the way down to the Ken Pratt Boulevard intersection. We're looking forward to bidding this project this summer. We are anticipating the construction duration to be about 12 months at the price of $4 million for the intersection and an additional $800,000 or so going to the railroad for their contractor to complete the required improvements for this project. Next up, we have the Dry Creek Trail Extension. This is a sister project to that Sunset improvements project that I just talked about. You can see it there running north and south on the east or the right-hand side of that photograph. This project has 2 elements. Number 1 is that blue line on the left there. That will be a new multi-use path that connects Court Parkway, that green stripe there, west to the that's the mall there on the west side, and that this is currently a gap. That trail currently terminates at the underpass underneath Hover Street. So this will continue that Dry Creek Trail all the way east here to Sunset Street. That second element that I mentioned earlier, it's all that the magenta line work there on the right-hand side, those are improvements on both Court Parkway, and also there's a RRFB, that's a rapid rectangular flashing beacon crossing improvement of Sunset Street to get you all the way across the road there safely if you are a bicycle or a pedestrian. This is another project we're looking forward to taking out to bid this summer, and we're currently estimating a construction cost of about $1 million. And finally, I have the last project here. This is a project that the city is partnering with CDOT on. As the board might be aware, CDOT they applied to and were awarded a RAISE grant for improvements along Colorado State Highway 119, the diagonal highway between Boulder all the way up in here to Longmont. This project at the intersection of 119 and Hover Street is the final element of that project. They started in the south and they're working their way north. And Alden, if you could go ahead and bring that line work up. This is what we just looked at. This project is still in design. It is at the 30% level, so this line work is mostly conceptual, but I wanted to illustrate sort of the big idea of this project is CDOT is proposing to take the westbound traffic. So if you're on Ken Pratt and you're leaving Longmont, you will travel up and over the intersection on a bridge. And that grade separation of that movement, it allows for safety and timing improvements at that intersection. So if you're in a vehicle, the remaining movements down there north-south on Hover, as well as any turning movements, have more time to can complete those movements in a way that doesn't cause congestion and also allows people to cross safely if you're walking across that intersection. This project also includes some improvements to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in that area. And that this project CDOT is looking to get started with some utility relocations in the spring of 2026, and they anticipate concluding construction at the end of 2027. The current city commitment to this in our partnership with CDOT is about $2 million. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
As Alden mentioned, I'm Sarah Kreitcha in Parks and Natural Resources. I'm in the Open Space Division, and I'm going to walk you through two multimodal trail projects that we're working on. So the first one is St. Vrain Greenway, Phase 13, and that's the turquoise alignment on the map. With to the west are the current trail system. So it's going to complete the city's eastern extension of the St. Vrain Greenway, which we'll construct the trail from Sandstone Ranch Nature Area up to the northeast, connecting into the St. Vrain State Park Trail System. So it includes sections of concrete bikeway, Crusher Fines Trail, 2 bridges, including one over St. Vrain Creek, just north of Highway 119, and an underpass at Highway 119 and County Road 5.5. So we're wrapping up design and right-of-way acquisitions, and we anticipate going out to bid for construction in the second quarter of this year, with construction costs estimated at $14.5 million, and partially funded by a Dr. Cog state tip funding. And then the next one is just to the north. It's the Weld County Road 26 multi-use trail. So this is going to provide a multimodal connection along the north side of County Road 26 from Union Reservoir east to County Road 7, and then it'll travel up north to the town of Meade and also, again, tie into the St. Vrain State Park Trail System to the southeast. Design kicked off in late 2023 with Weld County as the lead and the City of Longmont, Town of Firestone, and Town of Meade as partner agencies. So the design effort has been split into 2 phases based on how we're going to do the construction. So design for the first phase is approaching 90%, and it includes the trail segments along County Road 26 and the west side of County Road 7. Design for the second phase is approaching 60% and includes an underpass at Weld County Road 26, just west of County Road 7, which will then tie it into St. Vrain State Park Trail System. The design is supported by a Dr. Cog grant of $900,000 in federal tip funding. Construction is envisioned to be completed in multiple phases, as I mentioned, based on the availability of funding. So Longmont will lead the first phase of construction, which is supported by a Dr. Cog grant of nearly $2 million in state and federal tip funding. Phase 1 of construction is expected to begin in early 2026 and comprise a portion of the trail segment along County Road 26, including an at-grade crossing at the Great Western Railway. So subsequent phases of construction are currently unfunded. However, the City of Longmont is on the wait list for additional DRCOG funding, and Weld County and the town of Meade are leading efforts to secure other grant funding. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it out for the night. We have our last two projects that we'll talk about under design. Second to last project being the Pace Street Improvements Project, which is from 9th Avenue to 17th Avenue. This project is comprised of three primary scopes of work. First being to address drainage deficiencies at various locations along the perimeter of the roadway, since there is an unfinished curb, or no curb rather, in many areas of this corridor. The second component is an asset management piece to rehabilitate the aging asphalt infrastructure on that stretch of Pace Street. And the last being to implement pedestrian and bike improvements along the section from 9th to 17th Avenue. Right now, just in the form of buffered bike lanes in each way. However, with the adoption of the TMP right around the corner here, and this project being at a 60% design phase, there still is going to be some discussion about how is implementation of protected bike lanes potentially something that's going to be coming alongside this project. How that may or may not be able to apply to Pace Street is still going to be under discussion. As far as the pedestrian improvements for this corridor, various intersections will see improvements, including access via curb ramps that are either non-directional or non-compliant currently. And we're also going to be looking at adding rectangular rapid flash beacons, RFBs, the flashing yellow lights you see around town at a couple locations as well. As I mentioned, design is about 60% complete. It's under design review right now for that phase by city staff. We're looking at executing construction of the project in 2026. Last project for this evening is the Kaufman Street Extension Project, also related to the First and Main Station, which is adjacent to this corridor of Kaufman Street between First Avenue and Boston Avenue. This project is the extension of Kaufman Street from First Avenue down to Boston Avenue. It is a partnership project with RTD, with the city playing the primary role as designer and construction manager for this project. Since it is the partnership project with RTD, that means that this is where the transit hub, BRT transit hub, is going to be housed on the east side of this new extension of Kaufman Street. As far as the roadway improvements themselves, the actual improvements include a continuation of much of what is actually already being constructed to the north on Kaufman Street. So short crossing distance for pedestrians, wider sidewalks, fully separated bike lanes in this particular area, actually a two-way cycle track on the west side of the roadway, as opposed to separated directional bike lanes on either side of the road. This project is at a 60% design phase completion, and we are looking to advertise it at the end of this year and construct starting early next year. So that concludes at least the presentation in terms of dedicated projects we'll be taking a closer look at. There are more projects that were included in the communication that we did not specifically showcase. Those shown in blue here are those that we did not actually talk in any detail about. However, we do have staff available here to answer what questions you may have about those or any of the ones that we've covered up to this point. So that concludes our content. We can open up for questions at this point.
Well, I guess I'll start. Good to see you again. Just real quick, the 3/4 of a cent sales tax. What does that produce average every year?
So we usually see about $24 million in revenue that we program into the budget. So, but that is not all generated by the 3/4 cent sales tax. There is about 4 to 5 million, if I recall my budget correctly, that is state dollars that are state tax dollars that are provided that we include in revenue for our streets programs. So I'm going to guess around 19 to 20 million for generated from the 3/4 cent sales tax.
And what year was that passed?
86, 1986. And has it always been 3/4 cent? We have never raised that rate at all. The amount that is considered revenue has grown considerably as the population of Longmont grows and we have more sales in town.
All right. I do think, since 1986, maybe we should relook at upping that. Probably not this year, but maybe during a midterm cycle. So hopefully I'm still on this board to recommend that in a year's time or so. Just because, Kaufman Street, is 16 million? And it was a conversation earlier, we were expecting 7 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, inflation is real and we have needed projects we should do. So, then another question is just kind of details. So you mentioned Pace Street, Alden, potentially protected, maybe not, depending on kind of how things shake out. But do we, as a city, do we have any sort of policy of like, if the road speed is 35 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, we should not have, or we should have protected, or not even a bike lane, focus on a side path? Like, is there a general rule?
There is not a policy in the city currently that would address that. That would be I would, in response, as we look at Vision Zero, speed limits on roads would be an item in the action plan. Policies for that could then move forward to address protected versus buffered bike lanes on certain roads. What Alden did not mention in his presentation is that we do anticipate adjusting, as part of the project, adjusting the speed limit on Pace Street between 9th and 17th from its current 45 down to 35.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. And then real quick, because I didn't know, the 100 block of Kaufman for the west side, the two-way cycle track, how does that connect to then going north on the 200 block where then it separates again?
So currently the plan shows the two-way cycle track extending eventually all the way down to the St. Vrain Greenway. Just for clarification, that two-way cycle track will go all the way down and connect to the Greenway. As it approaches to the north, and it's actually, that particular graphic does not show the most current set of conditions. Just south of First Avenue, that two-way cycle track splits south of the intersection, and sort of parallel with the pedestrian crossing south of First Avenue is the location where it splits from the two-way cycle track to separated either side of the roadway. So as you're crossing the railroad tracks, that's one of the driving forces why we're doing that, is to have a two-way cycle track crossing at the railroad that then also meets a quiet zone condition, is something that is we've not found a lot of guidance from various either design entities or even the Public Utilities Commission on how do we actually approach something like that. So more of the conventional approach of having the separated bike lanes is the preferred approach, and so that's why we're separating them south of First Avenue.
Okay. Cool. And then I will ask the question that we didn't hear in the presentation, but about the St. Vrain Greenway, specifically more the Hover Street reach, because my understanding is there'll be a split channel proposed, so another bridge along Hover, and what I'm reading is it's only 30% design, if I'm trying to speed read that real quick.
I believe so. I think 30% design for that Hoover Street reach. Actually, currently only funded through 30% design as well.
Okay.
And I believe once that 30% design is reviewed and approved, or at least vetted to continue, then additional funding will become available for design to continue the project.
Okay.
And that was a condition of the grant agreement with the feds or with the state that carried to 30%. That was what our funding, we had about $1 million on a $1.4 million design project. So how that as we get through design and start looking at conceptuals, we can bring that information forward for what the trail is going to look like. The preferred alternative was the split flow, in part because that leaves the existing channel currently going under for the St. Vrain under Hoover alone. There's a lot of environmental issues with that. So that part of that was if we leave kind of that area alone and provide for the overflow, which is the split flow, that will reduce the floodplain in a significant part of the city.
And then is the city also open to the idea of another underpass for bike ped trail work as we see more and more development to the west via the split, the split flow?
I don't think that we have indicated yay or nay on that.
Okay.
I don't know that it's ever really
yeah.
come up in a discussion.
Yeah.
I think if we build another underpass under Hoover, I think the opportunity would be to provide more bike facilities and ped facilities for rather than retrofit a crossing. If we're going to be ripping up Hoover to put in a crossing, we might as well make it for not just for flow of water, but for bikes and peds as well.
Okay. No, I'm as we see more and more housing and apartments, I think giving other people other ways to travel is a big priority that we should be doing. So, but that is all I have right now. So it can go to anyone else. Thank you.
I honestly don't have any extra comments at this time. But yes, thank you for your time.
Thanks for the presentation. My first question is, when will City Council consider the draft CIP? Is that on their agenda now?
So the draft CIP that we were for 26 and the following 5 years would be, we don't have the current schedule for budget preparation, but they usually take it on in September. We do a presentation at the last council meeting in August. And so they take that on in September, October. I believe they have to have the budget approved by October. According to the charter. Phil and I have been discussing that, and as we move through the planning for the budget, we anticipate bringing the budget before TAB, the proposed budget, much earlier this year. So there's more opportunity for TAB members to look at the budget and provide input prior to us seeking a recommendation. So in the schedule, you're going to see it probably, we're anticipating May or June. May. We're looking at May to bring it in front of what we send to when we input the budget system. It sits in finance for many months while they process it, but we're going to bring it in front of TAB earlier this year.
So it comes to us in May or June and to council in September. Did I get that correct?
End of August, September, yeah.
When I was reviewing the TMP document, there was a link to the capital improvements program that I clicked on. Is that the current draft CIP? I think it was titled 2023 to 2027, or is that an older document?
So I saw that as well. It does say 23 to 27. The current document that's been approved by council is 25 to 29, I believe. So we would have to look at that to see if it needs to get updated. Should be referencing, I would think, the current budget.
Yeah, it's easy to change. Okay. So do I have the right staff audience to ask questions about that overall CIP, the current draft? Okay, so
So to be clear, it's not a draft. 25 to 29 has been approved by council. It's approved in late 24.
okay, so what's the next one that they're working on? It gets revised every year, right?
Yes,
For
it
a
does.
5-year period. Okay.
Yes, and that has not started yet for the 26 to 30 cycle.
It hasn't started, so maybe my question can't be answered, but I'll ask it anyway.
Ask it anyway.
For the CIP that you're most familiar with, not just the selection of projects that you presented this evening, which, by the way, was much appreciated, how many 8-lane intersections would result from implementing that CIP? Our understanding on this board is that there are capacity improvements proposed for Hover in the vicinity of maybe Nelson and Hover that would result in a new 8-lane intersection.
So the project of Hover and Nelson,
Yeah.
basically the design was never finalized. It was put on hold. And within the existing budget, it is listed as an unfunded project.
Mm-hmm.
So it is in the budget, but it is not funded. So within that 5-year program, we currently do not plan to move forward with that project.
All right. Well, to me, just having it on the CIP indicates intent, whether it's funded or unfunded. So, and that intent, I guess, is what concerns me. Now, so that's Hover and Nelson. Are there others? Are there other proposed capacity expansions that would result in 8-lane?
I'll go out on a limb and say, to my knowledge, there are not.
So that's the one. Okay. Okay, thank you. And then another question for the overall CIP. How many building renovation projects or drainage projects or other projects that don't seem to have a direct link to transportation are being funded by street tax revenues?
We would have to review the budget and get back to you on that.
All right.
Okay, it's pretty clear of what is funded out of the street fund. There is within the 2025 to 29 budget, there is a statement in the back, the street fund, basically statement lists all of the projects that are funded through the street fund. And so
Right.
there are several building renovations. There is prairie dog safety improvement projects that are listed in there. And that is certainly something that we can bring back or send it to the board in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I haven't completed my review, but I did notice that each individual project sheet also identifies the funding sources. So,
And it's summed up in the back of the budget. If you look in the very last, all of those funds list the projects that are funded out of those particular. You see it in water and waste. There are example I'll use is called PBF 192. That is a building project that is funded. It is for the airport road maintenance facility.
Mhm.
It's funded from streets. It's funded from
Yeah.
water. It's funded from storm drainage.
I think we've discussed that
Yeah.
at a previous meeting. Okay, thanks very much. I will look for that.
Yep, we can get that for
summary
the whole
section.
board.
And that's it for me.
Thank you for the presentation. Very exciting projects coming up. I have no questions.
I did have one on the Colorado 119 and Hoover intersection. I know that it originally was proposed to be an underpass and is now an overpass. And I'm just wondering, is there a cost differential for that? Yeah, just like more ideas as to why that change occurred.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So, this project, as CDOT has worked from south to north, they've been working on getting a clearer picture of the costs of the proposed improvements. In the process of this project, they applied for and received the grant, and there are specific scope elements that were included in that grant application. One of which was grade separated multimodal crossing at the intersection. What that has sort of developed into, at first was proposed, you're correct, as an underpass. There have been budget challenges on this project, especially due to utilities that are underground in the vicinity of the intersection as well. And so CDOT's most recent proposal, and this is something that we continue to work on as recently as this morning, is the overpass, which would be attached to that, the automobile mode overpass in that same area. That being said, what we end up deciding on and what CDOT ends up proposing in the final design is still a work in progress, and that's something I'm happy to keep the board appraised of as we make progress with developing the project design.
All right. I look forward to updates as they arise. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, by the way. Great presentation. I echo again what the board mentions about all this. On the Kaufman Street, on the Hoover Street overpass, and I know CDOT is kind of playing the lead on this. How are we going to accommodate the disruption that's going to happen at that intersection? Or how is CDOT going to? Because Pike is going to get
Very
just-
carefully.
Yeah, how is there going to be any capacity? You really can't with some of the streets that are around there. So, where's the capacity going to go?
Chair Lehner, board members, as with any, and I assume you talked during construction. As with any major project,
Yeah.
they're usually required a traffic control plan.
Yeah.
And that can be very simple of shifting lanes, or it can be very complicated and built through phases. We're still awaiting plans from CDOT as how they're proposing to accomplish that. They've been working with us pretty well with our team. I don't know that we have a traffic control plan yet. They laid out. They're still working to figure out what they're gonna do. And so, whether they propose to close lanes, shift traffic, we'll have to see. And part of that disruption, there will be disruption on any project you take on in the city of Longmont. Sidewalk work, you name it, there's going to be some form of disruption. Part of that is how we communicate. How we resolve that would be communicating to residents, notifying them early enough that for detours of where they can move to. That does put strain on other roads in the city if they choose to detour around it. We'll just have to wait and see.
The signal bar alone is going to be the challenge.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think I'd like to add to one other thing that I think will be an asset as we work on figuring out how the impact can be minimized. CDOT is delivering this project using an alternative delivery method called CMGC, which, long story short, involves the contractor at a much earlier stage than is typical for a construction project. There's already been a couple of pretty big items that have been changed because of their input, and the contractor, they don't want to shut down any more than they need to either. They have definitely a benefit to be gained for keeping the work as efficient as possible, both with respect to their work area that they need and also the impact so that they can try to get work done at off-peak times. So that's something that's definitely on our radar. And like Jim mentioned, we're working very closely with CDOT's communications staff and team on this project, and whatever they end up coming up with, we'll broadcast as far and wide as we can to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Okay, because the other, I guess, challenge, and of course I know CDOT's its own entity, but the Pike and 95th and the housing that's gone in there, and a lot of action kind of going in that area. Again, that's just going to almost exacerbate this issue of whatever shutdowns, movements, redirects that they're going to do could be very painful. But I get it. Okay. Any other questions? Great. Thank you.
That's all we had. Thank you.
Okay, let me find my agenda here. So real quick, why don't we do comments from board members? I'm not going to put you on a timer, but.
Thank you for the presentations tonight. Happy to be a resident of Longmont.
Then thanks again. I'm excited for the TMP to finally get its way through to council. So, but yeah, congrats on that. Thanks.
I'll just go. Yeah, the TMP was a huge lift, and that's great. And I'm glad that we were able to move that forward. Always looking at the CIP is good to see what's been happening and what's coming down the road. All in all, fantastic job by staff. Everybody's just done a great job.
My thanks also to staff and our consultant who was here earlier. Learned a lot. I learned a lot from reviewing the TMP, and I appreciate your patience with answering all my questions.
Thank you all. Really appreciate all the presentations. Makes me really excited for what's to come and excited for all these new adventures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, just echoing what everyone else has said. I do want to tell Tab that on February 28th, the City Council will have their retreat at the Water Services Center, right? You don't know? Waste management? Wastewater facility starting, I think, at 8 o'clock. So some of the questions that you all were asking about the CIP projects, that's something that you can come, you wouldn't really talk until after the retreat, but I'm pretty sure you'll learn a lot of information on what's going on with council, what we're talking about. I myself personally always love to hear your input. I know we're going to be talking about Envision, not Vision Zero, but our Longmont, our comprehensive plan and Envision Longmont. So it'd be nice that if you all want to come and give your 2 cents or 5 cents, 10 cents, no more than $1. So I would love to hear that and hear your perspectives on some of the projects or about TMP, whatever it is. I think it's important for City Council to hear from you all if you are available. That's on a Friday and it's all day, of course. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a couple of city council members, including myself, will be going to NLC in DC again. If there are anything, this is really directed more so to staff, anything that you want. We have no clue what the federal government, what they're going to be talking about. Anything that you all would like for me to address or information that you would like for me to find out, please send me an email so I can know I can look for that. Any questions or anything you all may have. It's a great time for me to find out what's coming down the pipeline, with the federal government. The president may be there or not, I don't know, but usually there are so many people from the cabinet that will be talking about what they're doing and where the funding is where it's going, or sound like no funding. But so I just wanted for you all to be thinking about that. Send me some emails that we will be gone March. It's the March 10th through the 13th. So, and then also Capitol Hill, so we can talk to our own representatives. So we'll talk to Hickenlooper, Representative Nagoose. Any questions like that you all want to shoot my way, I would definitely try to represent you all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Items for upcoming agenda, which would be our next meeting is March 10th. Phil, do we have anything with respect to upcoming agendas and items?
Really, your March meeting, Chair, is all about RTD. So they usually take the full 2 hours plus. So all the things that we just talked about RTD, bring that next month, and we'll chat with them. Thank you.
Okay, great. Unless there's anything else, I think we can maybe get a motion to adjourn for the night.
Sure was. Motion to adjourn the February 10th Transportation Advisory Board meeting.
Seconded.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's a wrap. Thank you.